We're back in the Class C racing exhibit right here on the second floor at Wheels Through Time. It's Drive for History, and today we're highlighting two incredibly cool hot rod Harley-Davidson Class C racers. The 1941 Harley-Davidson WLDR and this 1932 Harley-Davidson, a kind of mix-match combo RLWR. So incredibly cool machine. I'm going to tell you all about this one real shortly. But first, the Harley-Davidson WLDR at hand. Incredibly special bike. Last year for the model WLDR. So in 1937, Harley-Davidson debuted the new model WLDR racing machine. It was 45 cubic inch, 3-speed transmission, and was kind of strictly designed for Harley-Davidson Class C racers. So low production, far lower than standard production for the road model of that era. Prior to the WLDR, Harley-Davidson actually debuted their new Class C racing machine in 34. It was an RLDR. Now the difference, R's and W's, is that circulating oil pump right here. So when Harley-Davidson debuted that RLDR, it was just a total loss oil system. Oil's just fed down from the tank. It's not circulated back to the oil tank. So just metered down to the engine. It's more of a oil metering system than it is a pump. So as the WLDR comes out in 37, now you've got full recirculating oil. Things got a lot easier from there. So this example finished out in the Stars and Stripes, incredibly cool machine, owned by the famed Harley-Davidson dealer from Hammond, Indiana. His name was Harry Molinar. Now, a lot of you guys have heard us talk about Harry before. Harry was a dealer in Hammond, Indiana, really tight with the factory, got a lot of experimental stuff, non-production stuff, low production stuff that other folks just couldn't get. A lot of Harry's rarest motorcycles are right here at Wheels Through Time. The 1941 TA, the 1928 Harley-Davidson FH 3-bar hill climber, the Harley CAC. Each of these bikes they made 10 of, 15 of, 30 of, 20 of. So incredibly rare stuff. The WLDR here at the museum, incredibly cool motorcycle, and it absolutely rips. Now, Harry, kind of some neat history about the machine itself. Harry ordered these machines in 1940, okay, and this is actually the dealer's record of purchase from the Finance Corporation. And here you have Harry on 10/4/1940. The machine was shipped to Molinar and Hammond. Here it is identified by VIN number 41 WLDR 1563. So incredibly neat stuff. Balance due at the time, he owed $294 on this bike. Now heading over this way, another neat piece of history that kind of ties it all together. This is the actual sales order. So this would have been filled out by Harry back in the day. And as you can see, Will call 1941, he ordered a WLD. Now that's scribbled out, the WLD. The D was a high performance road model. It's actually crossed out, and right here in red pen you can see that it's scribbled in WLDR with an arrow, and it says per WHD, William H. Davidson. So that was on September 6, 1940. So it's really kind of an upgrade from one of the founders of the company. Again, Harry tight with the Harley Motor Company, inevitably or undoubtedly, I should say, knew all of the founders, and at that time must have had a pretty tight relationship with William H. in order to get him to upgrade that. So this machine, again, 1941, last year for the WLDR. In the very same year that they had the last year WR production, they had the first year for the WLDR, or excuse me, the WR production. So the WR was Harley-Davidson's full-on factory race machine. Early Class C rules stipulated that you had to ride to the track. It had to be a road model motorcycle that you modified for racing. By 1941 comes around, the rules had changed quite a bit, and Harley-Davidson was actually allowed to make a non-street racing motorcycle for Class C racing. So very similar machines, but some differences internally. This motorcycle, it's got the big fin racing cylinders with the big monster intake port, big huge 1.5-inch Linkert carburetor on the other side, high compression aluminum heads, big old huge Wyco magneto. As we said, these pump out upwards of 30,000 volts, so it's a big hot spark, and it's made strictly for racing. So up front, you've got a brakeless front wheel, cool little spool hub, early style racing hub, Front and rear 18-inch rims with these original Firestone Sportsman racing tires. These tires are probably 80 years old. They still hold air, and I wouldn't be too scared to get out on the track and race them. Ride control front end. You can even see right on this 1-year model only front fender, it's still got the original dealer decal, so really neat stuff. Kind of a side story about this bike. My dad had owned this bike for maybe 20 years, 25 years, and the bike was in running and operating order, and it was missing the tank strip here, this top tank strip that covers the in-between of the gas tanks there. Well, at the same swap meet that he bought the bike 25 years earlier, we ended up finding this top tank strip, and as you can see, all the stars line up. It absolutely is the tank center divider that came off of this motorcycle. So skinny WR style racing seat and pillion pad for sliding back and staying out of the wind. This is a brakeless rear hub also, so again, just spins as good as you can imagine. Ball bearing hub. You don't need brakes when you're racing, guys. All they do is slow you down. So 1932, what I kind of call the RLWR. This is a combination actually owned by Harry Molinar. This motor was, my dad always told me that this was one of Harry's favorite motors. And what it is it's kind of a mix-match combo of a motorcycle that never really existed. So as I was telling you earlier in the video, the RLDR was debuted in 1934. So 34, 35, and 36, Harley Davidson offered this particular racing model that did not circulate oil. Meanwhile, when they debuted that WLDR with circulating oil, they were making big jumps in breathing. So motorcycles could just take a deeper breath, better porting in the cylinders, higher compression. So what he's done here, Harry, is he's taken the earlier type bottom end and mated it to that WR style top end. So why would he do that, you ask? Now, I was mentioning the circulating oil pump. Well, circulating oil pump, believe it or not, is quite a bit of drag on an engine to be able to pump oil all the way down and pull pressure and off the engine and pump it back to the oil tank that sits up about 18 inches higher than the engine. Considerable drag to run a circulating oil pump. We all know that it's preferable now because you don't really have to be cognizant of the amount of oil in your bottom end. Now, this is coming from a time, though, where this used to be the way that it was. The total loss bottom ends, really from Harley's earliest days. It was a drip feed oil system, and you were always cognizant of the amount of oil in your lower end. So it was no difficult thing for racers to be able to stay on top of that. So what Harry did was he used that lower end. This is actually a 1932 factory hill climbing lower end. And what Harry's done is he's used the 32 hill climbing lower end because it doesn't have that circulating oil pump. Now he's got considerably less drag. You use that late style top end that breathes much, much better. And you've got really a faster motorcycle than even, say, a Harley-Davidson WLDR or a motorcycle with potentially a potentially faster motorcycle than a WR or WLDR. So my dad ended up having this motor for many, many years. It sat on our hill climb hill right back in the rear part of the museum. And about 5 or 6 years ago, he decided he'd been looking at this thing long enough, decided to build a whole motorcycle around it. So what you have here is a faithfully recreated Class C racer with all original components and some pretty neat stuff. Just the spark plugs in this engine. This has got the big 1 1/4 inch Harley Davidson racing spark plugs. They're absolutely impossible to find. And original plugs. They've been sitting in that motor for years and years. What we're going to do is fire this thing up. Makes a great sound. You see it's got the cool little dual exhaust setup. Again, this one's set up for TT style racing, so it's got a front brake, it's got a rear brake, and starts and stops just like it's supposed to. Tiny little WR gas tanks. Now, these WR gas tanks have actually been modified to hold gas on this side, and then they've actually split this tank to hold oil in the front and gas in the back, so you can kind of look at this like your reserve tank. So we're going to get this thing fired up, listen to it make some noise so you guys can enjoy. Oh, here we go. pretty awesome machine. Combo motor from one of Harley Davidson's most famous dealers of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, Harry Molinar. Really, really glad to have that motorcycle running. And one of these days here, we'll get that 41 WLDI fired up again just the same. Guys, thanks for tuning in to the Drive for History. We got more great stuff coming to you this week. If you're enjoying what you see, check out driveforhistory.com and make a contribution today. Remember, every contribution helps fuel us, the museum that runs. Thanks for everything you do.